The lantern went out in Maria Elena Lucero's hand just as the wind came hard off the Sangre de Cristo mountains and slammed the schoolhouse door against its frame. For one breath, the whole room went black. 30 children stopped breathing with her. Outside, sleet scratched at the windows like fingernails. The little stove in the corner had burned low, and the cracked roof above the back benches gave a slow, steady drip into a tin basin. Somewhere beyond the glass, a horse screamed against the weather, and the sound went through the children like a blade. "Stay seated," Maria Elena said. Her voice did not shake. That was important. A teacher's voice could be a roof when the roof itself was failing. Nico Romero, the small boy with the bad leg, clutched his slate against his chest. 2 little girls began whispering prayers in Spanish. The older boys tried to look brave and failed. Wind pushed through the loose window frame and made the torn map of the territory tremble on the wall. Maria Elena struck a match. The flame jumped, showed her round face and dark eyes, and the brief gold of it then died. She tried again. The second match lit. She held it to the lantern wick. The wick caught, flickered, then sank into darkness. The hinge on the lantern door hung crooked. The base had come loose. She had known it was failing since morning, but there had been lessons to teach sums, to correct boys, to separate a crying child, to comfort, and the whole long business of proving every hour that she was more than the shape people saw when she entered a room. She set the useless lantern on her desk and looked at the children. "We will sing," she said. That was how she carried them through the storm. She began softly an old hymn she had heard in Santa Fe, and one by one the children joined her. Their voices were thin, at first frightened and uncertain, but they grew stronger as the wind worried the walls. Maria Elena stood in the dark beside the dead lantern, full-bodied and steady. One hand resting on the desk, singing, as if light were something a person could make with breath alone. By the time the storm lessened, the children had stopped crying. By the time their parents came for them, Maria Elena had smiled so many times her face ached. Only when the last child was gone did she sit down. The room was gray with late afternoon. Sleet slid down the windows. Her fingers smelled of sulfur from the failed matches. She looked at the broken lantern and felt foolishly as if the thing had betrayed her in public. She had been in Arroyo Hondo only 6 days. 6 days was long enough for the town to decide certain things. The new schoolteacher was educated. That was agreed upon. She spoke well. She wrote a fine hand. She had brought books from Santa Fe and had already scolded the Gutierrez twins into silence without raising her voice. And she was fat. That was agreed upon too. No one said it plainly to her face. They said softer things, which were worse because they arrived dressed as kindness, a handsome face, a strong build, a woman made for winter. Good that she had teaching, since some lives required practical arrangements. Maria Elena had heard such words since she was 13 years old, and her body had begun taking up more space than people thought a girl had a right to claim. She had learned to move with care between chairs, doorways, pews, and opinions. She had learned which smiles were gentle and which were knives laid flat. Arroyo Hondo was no different from other places in that way. It was beautiful, though. The village sat low beneath the mountains, made of adobe walls the color of baked earth, with cottonwoods bending along the acequia and the mission bell marking the hours as if God himself kept time there. Wagons came down from Taos. Riders passed through with blankets, hides, flour, news, and dust. In the mornings, smoke lifted from hornos and cook stoves. In the evenings, men gathered near the plaza and spoke of weather, cattle, water rights, and horses, especially horses. In Arroyo Hondo, a man on horseback was a story. A man at the anvil was only the sound behind it. Maria Elena had noticed that before she knew anyone's name. The vaqueros were watched. Boys straightened when they rode past. Women glanced from shaded doorways. Old men judged the silver on a bridle, the cut of a saddle, the easy balance of a rider who seemed born above the ground rather than on it. Diego Montoya had ridden through the plaza on her 3rd morning in town, and every head had turned. She had been standing outside the schoolhouse with a broom in her hand. Diego wore a dark hat, polished boots, and a jacket that fit his shoulders as if someone had tailored it with admiration in mind. His horse was a deep bay with a white star on its forehead. He had tipped his hat to her, not mockingly, not lazily, but with practiced warmth. Later, Doña Pilar Ortega at the Mercantile told her who he was. Diego Montoya, the widow, said, folding brown paper around Maria Elena's purchase of chalk and lamp oil. Good family, good horse, good future. The sort of man a woman thanks heaven for noticing her. Doña Pilar had looked at Maria Elena then only a moment too long. Maria Elena had smiled as if she had not understood. She understood everything. The man at the anvil she learned about more slowly. His forge stood at the far edge of the plaza, a low adobe building with a patched roof and a chimney that breathed coal smoke from before dawn until after dark. She heard the hammer every morning when she walked to the schoolhouse. A steady sound, iron answering iron, not music exactly, but something the town depended on so completely that no one listened to it. His name was Tomas Cordero. He was 24, Doña Pilar said. Quiet. Half Hispano by his father with Pueblo blood through his mother's people near Taos. A good worker, plain, serious, useful. Useful was the word people used when they had taken the trouble to need a man, but not the trouble to know him. Maria Elena first saw him clearly on the morning after the storm. She carried the broken lantern across the plaza with both hands. The sky had cleared, but the cold remained. Mud sucked at the hem of her skirt. Men were already moving about town, and she felt their glances pass over her body with the usual quick measurements. She kept her chin level. At the mercantile, Tomas Cordero was kneeling by the front door, repairing the hinge the wind had damaged. His sleeves were rolled despite the cold. His forearms were strong and marked by old burns. His black hair fell forward as he worked, and there was soot in the crease beside his thumb. He looked up when her shadow crossed him, only for 1 second. But in that second, he did not look startled by her size. He did not look amused. He did not look away in pity. His eyes, dark and steady, went first to the lantern in her hands, then to her face, as if both things deserved accurate attention. Then he returned to the hinge. "Señorita Lucero," he said. She stopped. "You know my name. In Arroyo Hondo, everyone knows a new teacher's name by the second day, and by the sixth, they have opinions." She almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was true, and he had said it without cruelty. Doña Pilar opened the mercantile door from inside. "Take that lantern to the forge," she said. "Tomas will mend it, if it can be mended." Tomas rose, wiping his hands on a leather apron already blackened beyond rescue. "I can look at it now if you like." His voice was low, practical, not eager and not dismissive. Maria Elena followed him to the forge. Heat met her at the doorway, then sparks. Then the smell of coal, iron, sweat, and work so old it seemed built into the walls. Tools hung in careful order. Horseshoes cooled on a rack. A wagon rim leaned against one wall. The fire glowed with an orange heart breathing like a thing alive. Tomas took the lantern from her hands and turned it slowly. "The hinge is bent," she said. "The hinge is bent," he agreed. Then he opened it, pressed the base with his thumb, and frowned slightly. "But the hinge is not the trouble." She looked at him. "The base is loose. That is why the hinge bent. Fix the hinge alone and you will be back here in a month." He said this without superiority. He was not proving himself clever. He was simply telling the truth of the object before him. Maria Elena watched his hands move over the lantern. Large hands, scarred hands, gentle with broken things. "How long?" she asked. "Come back Thursday." She reached for her coin purse. "Should I pay something now?" He shook his head. "Pay when it holds light." The words stayed with her. She walked back to the schoolhouse under a clear, cold sky, feeling the absence of the lantern in her hands and the strange weight of being treated plainly. Not flattered, not judged, not reduced. Plainly. On Thursday she returned. The lantern sat on his workbench, repaired and polished, clean of soot. The hinge moved smoothly. The base was tightened. A small crack along the housing had been sealed so neatly she had to tilt it toward the firelight to see the repair. "You fixed the crack," she said. "It was there. No one else noticed it. It would have let water in." He named the price. It was less than she expected. "C'est moi." Maria Elena looked at him across the workbench. Behind him, the forge fire burned steadily, throwing light over his face, his apron, his iron-stained hands. Outside, a pair of vaqueros rode past laughing, and someone in the plaza called Diego Montoya's name with admiration. Tomas did not turn his head. He was already reaching for another broken thing. Maria Elena carried the lantern back toward the schoolhouse. Its glass caught the sun and flashed once in her hands, bright as a secret. Before she reached the door, she looked back. The hammer had started again, steady, unpraised, necessary. And for the first time since arriving in Arroyo Hondo, she found herself listening. By Monday morning, the repaired lantern had become part of the schoolhouse, as if it had always belonged there. It hung from a black iron hook near the front desk, its glass clear, its door closing with a soft, obedient click. Maria Elena noticed it more than she meant to. Every time she passed beneath it, she remembered Tomas Cordero's hands turning it over, finding the loose base no one else had cared to see. The children noticed it too. "It don't smoke no more," said Lucinda Ortega, squinting up at it during copywork. "Doesn't," Maria Elena corrected gently. Lucinda sighed. "It doesn't smoke no more. Anymore. It doesn't smoke anymore," the girl said with the suffering dignity of an old woman forced to carry water uphill. A few children laughed. Maria Elena allowed it. Laughter, when it was not cruel, warmed a room better than the stove. The schoolhouse had taken shape under her hands in small ways. She had moved the smallest children closer to the stove, and the older boys farther from the windows where their eyes liked to wander toward passing horses. She had cleaned the chalkboard until the old ghost of lessons disappeared. She had sorted the books by subject instead of size, which troubled Nico Romero so deeply that he rearranged them twice when he thought she was not looking. Nico sat near the second row, his bad legs stretched slightly to the side. He was 9 years old and narrow as a fence rail, with dark hair that never stayed combed and eyes that studied the world as if it might contain hidden doors. He didn't speak unless he had weighed the sentence first. When the other boys ran outside, Nico moved slower, his left foot dragging just enough to remind everyone of the mule accident 2 summers before. Children could be tender, and children could be merciless. Often they were both before noon. At recess, Maria Elena saw the Gutierrez twins galloping in circles, slapping their thighs and whinnying like horses. Nico stood beside the woodpile, pretending not to hear when one of them said, "Careful, Nico. Your horse has gone lame." Maria Elena stepped onto the porch. The boys stopped at once. "Inside," she said. "But recess ain't inside." They went in. She kept them after lessons and made them copy from the reader until their hands cramped. She did not raise her voice. That made it worse for them. A quiet punishment carried further than shouting. When the room emptied, Nico remained at his desk, drawing with a slate pencil. Maria Elena walked over and saw the shape of a horse. Not a childish horse either. The head was too large and the legs too thin, but there was motion in it, longing almost. "That is a fine horse," she said. Nico covered the slate with his hand. "It ain't finished, isn't. It isn't finished," she smiled. "No good thing ever is at first." He considered this, then moved his hand. The horse had one front leg lifted as if it meant to step out of the slate and cross the floor. "My grandfather says iron remembers the fire," Nico said. "He says that is why a knife keeps its temper if it was made right. He sounds like a wise man." Nico looked toward the lantern. "Can iron remember a horse?" Maria Elena looked at the drawing, then at the repaired lantern, then toward the far side of the plaza where the hammer had begun its late afternoon song. "I do not know," she said, "but I know who might." The next morning she found a reason to go to the forge. The schoolhouse desk hinge had been loose since she arrived. It was not an urgent problem, but urgency, she was learning, was not the only honest reason a person crossed a plaza. She carried the hinge wrapped in cloth and told herself she was being practical. A teacher needed a sturdy desk. Children respected order. Hinges mattered. Tomas was shoeing a chestnut mare when she came to the doorway. He had one hand firm on the animal's leg. His shoulder braced his body calm beneath the horse's weight. The mare shifted, nervous from the heat and noise. "Easy," he murmured. The word was not meant for Maria Elena, but it settled over her all the same. He finished the nail before he looked up. "Señorita Lucero, Señor Cordero." His mouth moved faintly, not quite a smile. "Something else stopped holding together my desk," she said, lifting the cloth bundle. "That happens to desks. They hear too many secrets." She looked at him, surprised. This time he did smile, but only briefly, as if humor were a tool he owned, but rarely brought out. She waited while he finished with the mare. The horse belonged to one of the Montoya riders, a young man with bright spurs and a red scarf at his throat. He paid Tomas without counting the coins closely, then rode away, calling to someone across the plaza. Tomas watched the horse's gait until it passed the mercantile. "She'll favor the left hind if he runs her hard," he said. "Will you tell him I did?" Will he listen? No. That should have sounded bitter. It did not. It sounded like weather. He took the hinge from her and examined it. "This is not broken. It is loose. That is different. Can it be made unloose?" This time the smile came more easily. "Yes." She sat on a low wooden stool near the wall because he didn't tell her not to. The forge was hotter than she remembered. Heat pressed against her cheeks and gathered beneath her collar. Tomas worked with careful economy heating, tapping, fitting, testing. He did not waste motion. He didn't fill silence out of fear of it. She had known men who talked because they liked the sound of their own certainty. Tomas seemed to speak only when the truth had finished forming. Nico Romero asked me whether iron can remember a horse, she said. Tomas stopped filing for half a breath. Nico asked that. Yes. What did you tell him that I knew who might know? He set down the hinge and looked toward the fire. His grandfather is from the Pueblo Road. Old Baltasar knows more about memory than most priests. Then can iron remember a horse? He thought about it seriously, which she appreciated more than he could know. Iron remembers pressure, heat, shape, the hand that asked it to become something. So if the hand knows a horse well enough, maybe. Nico will like that answer. Tomas went back to filing. Does he still draw them? You know he draws horses. His mother brings me their stove grate when it cracks. He used to draw in the dirt outside while he waited. He draws them as if he misses something. Tomas nodded once. He used to run. The words were plain, but the sorrow beneath them was not. When she left with the hinge repaired, Tomas charged 2 cents less than she expected. She argued. He looked genuinely puzzled, as if the value of the work were not a subject on which disagreement could be useful. The following week, the stove latch loosened. The week after that, the bell bracket cracked. By the third visit, Maria Elena knew she was no longer fooling either of them. She arrived with the broken bracket and found a second stool already set near the workbench. Neither of them mentioned it. She sat. Their conversations grew by small, stubborn inches. She learned that coal came dear because it had to be hauled by wagon from the railhead. She learned that wagon tires had to be heated and shrunk tight around the wheel before they cooled. She learned that iron could be ruined by too much heat just as bread could be ruined by too much fire, and children by too much correction. He learned that she had gone to normal school in Santa Fe, that she preferred arithmetic to grammar because numbers did not pretend to mean one thing while meaning another, that she had taken the teaching post in Arroyo Hondo because she wanted a place where work mattered more than drawing room manners. He did not ask why she had wanted such a place. She was grateful. Then later she wished he would. The town watched. Towns always did. Doña Pilar watched from behind the mercantile counter while measuring coffee beans into a paper sack. Her gray hair was pinned so tightly it seemed to pull judgment upward from her eyes. You visit the forge? Often, she said. The schoolhouse is old, so is the church, but I do not see you visiting Father Anselmo every Tuesday. Maria Elena folded her hands over the sack of beans. Perhaps Father Anselmo keeps better hinges. Doña Pilar made a sound that was almost a laugh and almost a warning. You are a clever woman, Maria Elena. Clever women sometimes forget that the world is not clever back. I try to remember. Good. Then remember this. A woman alone in a village is already a subject. A woman shaped like you and alone in a village is a sermon for people who were not asked to preach. The words struck. Not because they were new, but because they were old and found her anyway. Doña Pilar's face softened by half an inch. I do not say this to wound you. No, Maria Elena said. People rarely do. The widow tied the coffee sack closed. Diego Montoya asked whether you favor red flowers or white. Maria Elena went still. Why men do not ask such things because they are studying botany. Outside, a horse passed the window. For one foolish moment, Maria Elena hoped it was only any horse. Then she saw the bay coat, the white star, the polished rider. Diego Montoya entered the mercantile as if the door had been waiting for him. He removed his hat. Señorita Lucero. Señor Montoya. He had brought flowers wrapped in damp cloth, not wild flowers from the ditch bank, but careful flowers from a trader's wagon, expensive because winter made beauty difficult. For the schoolhouse, he said. Children learn better when there is something alive in the room. Doña Pilar looked pleased enough to ring the church bell. Maria Elena accepted them because refusing would have been unkind, and Diego had not been unkind. That was the trouble. He was warm, respectful, handsome, and entirely aware that the room approved of him. When he walked her back toward the schoolhouse, people looked. She felt their surprise as clearly as wind. Some looked pleased for her. Some looked impressed with him. A few seemed relieved, as if his attention had settled a question about what sort of future a woman like her was allowed to hope for. Diego spoke of the winter feast dance by the mission wall. You should come, he said. It is the one night this village remembers it has feet. I have schoolwork. Bring it. We will dance around the grammar. She laughed despite herself. He smiled, encouraged. Let me take you. She looked across the plaza. At the forge, Tomas was bent over a small shape on his workbench. Not a hinge, not a latch, something delicate. He heard a sound and covered it quickly with a cloth, but not before she saw the lifted neck, the small legs, the beginning of a horse made from iron. Something in her chest changed. Diego followed her gaze. "The blacksmith keeps busy," he said. "Yes," Maria Elena said. "He does." That afternoon, after Diego left her at the schoolhouse with the flowers, and every child asked whether she was going to marry him by Sunday, Maria Elena carried the cracked bell bracket to the forge. She found Tomas at the anvil. "No school disaster today?" he asked. "The bell bracket. That bell rings too hard. It has opinions." She set the bracket down, but her eyes went to the covered shape on the bench. "For Nico," she asked. Tomas did not look at it. He asked a fair question. "So you are answering in iron." He might believe iron better than words. She sat on the stool. Her heart felt strangely tender and strangely sore. "Diego Montoya asked me to the winter feast dance." Tomas's hand tightened around the tongs, only slightly. "Enough. He is a good man," Tomas said. "So I'm told." "He is." She watched his face. "Do you think I should go?" He placed the iron back in the coals with more care than necessary. "Yes." "Why? Because a woman like you deserves a man who can offer more than smoke and debt and a 2-room house beside a forge." For a moment the old hurt rose so fast she nearly stood. "A woman like you." She had heard it in too many mouths carrying too many meanings. Then Tomas looked at her, and she saw the truth of it. He had not meant her body. He had meant her worth. That was almost worse. She had been looked at all her life. What startled her was being seen, and here was the man who saw her most clearly blind as stone to himself. "Tomas," she said softly. He turned back to the fire. "You should go, Señorita Lucero." The formal name closed something between them. Maria Elena rose. The forge felt hotter than before, or perhaps that was only the sting behind her eyes. She took the repaired bracket, though he had not asked for payment, and she walked back into the cold light of the plaza. Behind her, the hammer did not start again for a long time. That night she put Diego's flowers in a chipped blue pitcher on the schoolhouse desk. They were lovely. Everyone would say so. Then she looked at the lantern Tomas had repaired, burning steady above the room, and made her decision. She would go to the dance. Not because the town expected it, not because Diego was handsome, not because a woman shaped like her should be grateful. She would go because her heart had begun walking toward a forge, and before it went any farther she needed to know whether it was walking toward truth or only toward fire. By sundown on the night of the winter feast, every lantern in Arroyo Hondo seemed determined to prove it was stronger than the cold. They hung from vigas and porch hooks from the mission wall, from poles driven into the hard ground around the plaza. Their flames bent when the mountain wind came down, then straightened again, stubborn and gold. The adobe walls held the last warmth of the day, though snow still lingered in the shadowed places where the sun had not reached. From the far end of the plaza came the tuning of fiddles, the low murmur of men, the bright calls of children already wild with sugar and freedom. Maria Elena stood inside the schoolhouse with Diego Montoya's flowers on her desk and her shawl around her shoulders, trying not to feel like a woman walking toward judgment. She had chosen her dark green dress because it was plain and well made, and because it did not apologize for her body. The bodice fit properly. The skirt fell cleanly. Her hair was pinned back with a small silver comb that had belonged to her mother. She had looked at herself in the schoolhouse window before the light failed and made herself hold her own gaze. "You are not going to be grateful for being chosen," she whispered. The words sounded stronger than she felt. Diego arrived just as the mission bell rang. He stood in the doorway with his hat in his hand, handsome enough to make the evening rearrange itself around him. His dark coat was brushed clean. His boots were polished. A silver clasp shone at his throat, and when he smiled, he did it with the calm ease of a man who had rarely been refused anything he truly wanted. "Señorita Lucero," he said, "you look very fine." It was a good compliment. Not too much, not careless. "Thank you," she said. "So do you." His smile widened. "I had to try. I knew I would be walking beside the schoolteacher." Outside, 2 girls from her class ran past the window and stopped dead when they saw him. Then they fled, giggling toward the plaza. Diego offered his arm. Maria Elena took it. The moment they stepped into the open, the town noticed. She felt it in the pause between fiddle notes, in Doña Pilar's sharp eyes from beside the food tables, in the way 2 ranch hands looked at Diego, then at her, then away too quickly, in the way one woman's face softened with an expression that was almost pity and almost approval, as if Diego had done something generous by arriving at Maria Elena's door. Maria Elena lifted her chin. Diego either didn't notice or was kind enough to pretend he did not. He guided her carefully across the uneven ground, adjusting his pace to hers without making a show of it. That mattered. She wished it did not, but it did. 1,000 small humiliations had taught her to recognize the mercy of not being rushed. The feast had already begun. Women passed plates of tamales, beans, and roasted squash. Someone poured coffee black enough to stand a spoon in. Children carried bizcochitos in both hands and left crumbs down the fronts of their coats. The fiddles gathered themselves into a lively tune, and boots struck the packed earth in rhythm. Diego introduced her to people she had already met, and somehow they greeted her more warmly with him beside her. That, too, she noticed. He brought her coffee. He made her laugh once with a story about a calf that had gotten itself into Father Anselmo's kitchen and refused to leave until it had eaten half a basket of apples. He danced with an old widow because she demanded it, and bowed afterward as if she were a governor's daughter. He was easy in every room, even under the open sky. A woman could do worse, Maria Elena thought. That thought had been offered to her all her life in one form or another. A woman like her could do worse. A woman like her should be sensible. A woman like her should know when respectability had placed its hat in its hands and come calling. Diego led her into the first dance. He was careful with her, but not timid. He made space for her body as if it belonged in the dance as much as anyone else's. For that she was grateful, though she hated that gratitude had to exist at all. Around them, people watched. The approval in their faces did not warm her. It pressed against her skin. "Are you cold?" Diego asked. "No." He went quiet. "I am often quiet." "No," he said gently. "You are often thoughtful. That is not the same thing." She looked at him, then surprised. There was more to Diego Montoya than shine and saddle leather. She had known that, perhaps. But knowing it made nothing easier. The dance ended. He bowed. She thanked him. He asked for another, and she gave it because refusing would have felt too pointed when he had done nothing wrong. On the second dance, he spoke of his family's land south of Arroyo Hondo, of horses wintering in the lower pasture, of his mother's insistence that no feast was complete without twice as much food as any person could eat. He spoke well. He listened when she answered. He did not once mention her size or make jokes or look around as if waiting for others to praise his charity. That should have been enough. It was not. The third tune began slower. The lanterns shook in a gust of wind, and for a moment the far edge of the plaza darkened. That was where she saw Tomas. He stood beyond the strongest light near the side of the mission wall, where the shadows gathered blue and deep. He wore a clean white shirt beneath a dark coat that looked seldom used. His hair had been combed back, though a stubborn lock had already fallen forward. His hands were washed, but the iron stain remained in the creases of his fingers. The marks of work no soap could argue away. He held his hat in both hands. Too tightly. The brim was bending. Maria Elena's breath caught in a place too deep for manners. He had come. She had thought he would not. Tomas Cordero belonged to the sound behind the evening, not the evening itself. He belonged to the forge, to the fire, to the steady hammer that made other men's saddles shine and other families' doors hold through winter. Yet there he stood still as a man watching something he had already decided he had no right to touch. Diego followed her gaze. His face changed only slightly. A lesser man might have tightened his grip. Diego did not. He simply looked from Tomas to Maria Elena and understood something he did not yet want to understand. The blacksmith came after all he said. "Yes," Maria Elena said. The tune began. Diego offered his hand. "Will you dance?" She looked at his hand, then toward the edge of the light. "I need a little air." His hand lowered. "Of course." She stepped away before courage could cool inside her. The plaza did not go silent, but it thinned around her. She felt people watching as she crossed the packed earth. Felt Doña Pilar's eyes sharpen, felt children pause mid-bite, felt Diego standing behind her dignified and still. Tomas saw her coming and looked briefly as if he might flee. He did not. She stopped before him. "You came," she said. "I came." His voice had that careful evenness again, the one that sounded less like calm than a door being held shut from the other side. "Dance with me." His eyes moved past her toward Diego. "Señorita Lucero, Maria Elena." He looked at her. "My name is Maria Elena," she said, "and I have been coming to your forge since the week I arrived, and I'm asking you to dance with me. I do not dance well. Then dance poorly with me. Something moved through his face, pain or wonder or both. People are watching. They have had practice. He glanced at her, then truly glanced and understood the old tiredness beneath the words. Slowly, he set his hat on the low wall. When he took her hand, his palm was warm and rough. The iron stains at his fingers looked darker against her skin. He led her awkwardly into the edge of the dance, far from the center where Diego had moved with such ease. Tomas was stiff at first, counting under his breath. 1, 2, 1, 2. She heard him and did not smile. His hand settled at her back with careful pressure. Not ashamed. Not uncertain because she was large. Careful because he was afraid that wanting something might break it. The knowledge of that went through her more deeply than any compliment Diego had offered. For years, men had touched Maria Elena in only 3 ways: accidentally, apologetically, or with the clumsy boldness of those who thought a fat woman should be grateful for any hand at all. Tomas touched her, as if she were neither burden nor bargain, as if she were simply there, real and whole, beneath his hand. The music slowed, the lanterns trembled. He stepped wrong and nearly struck her shoe. "I'm sorry," he said. "You are doing fine. I'm not. You are doing true. That is better." His eyes lifted to hers. For one fragile moment, the whole town seemed to fall away. No Doña Pilar, no Diego, no whispers about what kind of woman should accept what kind of man. There was only the cold air, the mission wall, the rough warmth of his hand, and the firelight still somehow clinging to him, though he had left the forge behind. When the music ended, neither of them moved at once. Then applause rose for the musicians, and the world returned. Tomas stepped back quickly, as if remembering himself were a punishment. "You should go back," he said, "to Diego. He brought you. I know who brought me. He is a good man." "So you have told me." "He is." "Yes," she said, "and I am tired of hearing Diego Montoya praised by the one man in this valley who refuses to name his own goodness." Tomas looked away toward the dark road leading to the forge. "Goodness does not feed a wife," he said. "It does not mend lungs. It does not make a house larger or hands cleaner." "No, but neither do silver spurs." His jaw tightened. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Why did you come tonight?" He did not answer. "Tomas." He looked at her then, and she saw it plainly. Want, fear, shame, a hope so starved it frightened him. He tried to smile, and the attempt hurt more than sorrow. One day he said, "A vaquero will win your heart." The words landed between them like something dropped and broken. Maria Elena stared at him. He had meant it kindly. That was the worst of it. He had meant to step aside before she had to ask him. He had meant to spare her the trouble of refusing a man who lived beside smoke and debt and dying coals. He had wrapped his own fear in generosity and offered it to her like a gift. The wind moved along the mission wall. Somewhere a child laughed. Somewhere Diego Montoya stood waiting with a grace Maria Elena respected and could not love. She took one breath, then another. "A vaquero may win the town's admiration, Tomas, but I would rather give my heart to the man who keeps the fire alive." He went very still. The lantern nearest them snapped in the wind and steadied again. Tomas looked at her as if she had spoken in a language he had once known as a child and forgotten through years of work. "There are not many blacksmiths worth such trouble," he said softly. She felt the last of her patience tremble. "I'm talking about you." His face changed. Not much. Tomas was not a man of large expressions, but something in him opened and recoiled at once, like a hand drawn too near flame. "Maria Elena, no, do not turn this into a kindness I gave to all hard-working men. I did not ask all hard-working men to dance." His eyes dropped to his hands. "That is the trouble," he said. "You see the work and you think it means something finer than it does. I see the man doing it. You see me in firelight. That is not the same as life. I have seen you before sunrise with soot on your face. I have seen you undercharge a widow who could not pay. I have seen you fix cracks no one noticed. I have seen you making an iron horse for a boy who thought the world had forgotten how to carry him." His mouth tightened at Nico's name. "That is not enough. For whom? For you." There it was, the wall he kept building. "I have a forge," he said. 2 rooms behind it, a roof that leaks if the wind comes wrong. Coal debt before winter is half done. My father was bent by 45 and coughing blood by 50. My hands will never be clean. My lungs may go the same road. People will whisper that you could have had better, and they will be right." The words were quiet. Each one had been sharpened long before this night. Maria Elena felt anger rise, not hot, but bright. People have whispered about me since I was a girl, she said. They whispered when I ate, when I did not eat, when I walked into church, when I stood beside thin cousins at weddings, when I took a teaching post instead of waiting for a man to consider me charitable enough to marry. Do you think I came to this village believing silence could be earned? He looked stricken. I did not mean I know what you meant. That is why it wounds me. He had no answer. She softened because she could not help it. You are making my choice for me in a gentler voice than others have used, but it is the same theft. Behind them, footsteps approached. Diego stopped a respectful distance away. His hat was in his hand now, too. The two men looked at each other, and in that look passed all the things neither would say in front of her. Señorita Lucero, Diego said quietly, would you like me to walk you home? Maria Elena turned to him. He deserved honesty but not cruelty. No, thank you, Diego. I will walk alone. A flicker of hurt crossed his face. He bowed his head. As you wish. He left without display, and that dignity made the ache worse. Tomas reached for his hat from the wall. Do not run from me, Maria Elena said. His fingers closed around the brim. I am not running. No, you are walking away slowly and calling it honor. He flinched. For a moment she thought he might stay. For a moment his eyes lifted and hope stood there naked and afraid. Then the old belief won. Good night, Maria Elena, he said. He walked away along the dark edge of the plaza toward the forge, where fire was simpler than love and iron, easier to understand than being chosen. Maria Elena remained beside the mission wall until the cold worked through her shawl. The music began again behind her, but it sounded farther away now. Doña Pilar watched from the food tables with a face that had lost some of its certainty. Diego stood near his horse, one hand on the saddle, looking not angry but thoughtful. Across the plaza, Tomas disappeared into the forge. A little while later, through the dark, Maria Elena saw the first orange breath of his fire rise behind the doorway. Inside, Tomas removed his good coat and hung it carefully on a peg. He stood in the forge without lighting the full lamps. The unfinished iron horse waited beneath its cloth on the bench. He drew the cloth back. The small creature stood half-shaped, one front leg lifted, its neck beginning to arch as if it were trying to become real. Tomas touched it with one stained finger. He could make tenderness out of iron before dawn for a child who limped. He could not make himself believe that tenderness might be returned. Outside, the fiddles played. Inside, the forge fire caught, and the hammer did not fall for a long time. 3 days before Christmas, the rain came down from the mountains like something that had lost patience. It struck the roof of the forge all morning, hard and cold, finding every weak place in the patched boards. Water slipped through one seam near the chimney and fell steadily into a dented pail Tomas had set beneath it before dawn. The sound kept time with his hammer. Drip, strike, drip, strike, drip. Outside, Arroyo Hondo had turned to mud. The plaza lay empty except for a mule tied under the mercantile awning and 2 boys running with sacks over their heads. The adobe walls had darkened with wet. Smoke from cookstoves flattened under the low sky instead of rising. Along the acequia, the water ran high and fast, carrying twigs, leaves, and the pale foam that came when mountain runoff grew angry. Tomas had been awake since before first light, though he had slept little after the dance. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Maria Elena standing beside the mission wall, lantern light trembling over her face. I am talking about you. The words followed him into the dark, into the morning, into every swing of the hammer. He tried to work them out of his body. Iron was honest. It did not say one thing and mean another. It softened when heated. It hardened when cooled. It bent if struck properly and broke if a man asked of it what it could not give. Tomas understood iron. He did not understand a woman who had looked at his smoke-dead scars and small life and still spoken as if she were offering her heart to something whole. A wagon tire waited on the floor. 3 hinge straps lay on the bench. Doña Pilar's stove grate needed a new pin. The unfinished iron horse stood beneath its cloth near the back wall, hidden from the room, though no one else was there to see it. He did not touch it. Near noon he heard footsteps in the mud outside. He knew them before he looked up. Maria Elena stood in the doorway with her shawl darkened by rain and small droplets caught in the loose curls near her temples. She carried nothing broken in her hands. That was the first thing he noticed. The second was that he had not set out her stool. She noticed too. Her eyes went to the empty place near the workbench. Then they returned to him. Good afternoon, Tomas, Señorita Lucero. The formality landed between them with a dull sound. Her face did not change, but he saw her take the wound and stand under it without lowering her head. I thought we had passed that, she said. He set the hammer down. carefully. I have work today. You have work every day, more than usual. Then I will not stay long. He turned toward the wagon tire because looking at her was dangerous. It may be better if you do not come so often. The rain grew louder. For a moment she said nothing. When she did speak, her voice was quiet enough that he had to listen. Do not do this, Maria Elena. Do not. The sound of his name in her mouth had nearly undone him at the dance. It nearly undid him again. He gripped the edge of the workbench. I'm trying to be decent. No, she said. You are trying to be afraid without calling it fear. That struck too close, and because it did, he hardened. You think courage is taking what you want because your heart has gone soft for it. I think courage is telling the truth. The truth is that my roof leaks. My coal bill is already behind. My father cannot climb the hill to church without stopping twice for breath because this work ate the air out of him. The truth is that by 45 I may cough the way he does, and by 50 I may not be good for anything but sitting by the door with a blanket on my knees. Her eyes shone, but not with tears, with anger. The truth is also that you are kind. Kindness will not keep you warm. It has kept this town alive. He shook his head. People already whisper about you. I know they do. I have heard enough at the forge when men forget I am not deaf. They talk about your shape as if your body were public land. I will not add myself to the weight you carry. I will not have them saying you were so desperate for a husband that you took the blacksmith with smoke in his lungs and mud at his door. The moment the words left him, he wished he could draw them back. Maria Elena's face went still. Not broken, not small. Still, people whispered before I knew your name, she said. They whispered when I was a girl and my dress seams had to be let out. They whispered when I refused a man who thought marrying me would be an act of Christian patience. They whispered when I took a schoolroom instead of waiting quietly to be chosen. You cannot save me from whispers, Tomas. He looked at the floor. She stepped closer. And I didn't ask you to. Outside, a shout cut through the rain, then another. Tomas lifted his head. The second shout came from the north road, thin and urgent beneath the storm. A bell began clanging near the mercantile, not the church bell, but the handbell Doña Pilar used when fire or flood or death had wandered too close to town. Tomas moved before thought finished forming. He grabbed his coat, then the pry bar from beside the anvil, the iron hook from the wall, and a length of chain coiled near the wagon tire. Maria Elena followed him into the rain. The north road had become a ribbon of mud running toward the arroyo. People were already moving that way, men with ropes, boys slipping and scrambling, women calling after them from doorways. Diego Montoya rode past at a hard gallop on the bay horsewater flying from its hooves. Tomas did not run like the others. He walked fast, head down, tools balanced over one shoulder, eyes fixed ahead. Maria Elena gathered her skirt in one hand and followed as far as the road allowed. At the bridge, the world had narrowed to water and panic. The old wooden span had broken on the south side where the iron brace had been rusting since autumn. Tomas had told the council twice. He had stood with his hand on that brace and said it would not hold another hard runoff. They had nodded and said spring would be soon enough. Spring had not come. A trader's wagon had gone halfway through the break. One front wheel hung deep in the brown rushing water, wedged beneath a twisted iron support. The driver, old Abel Trujillo, clung to the seat with blood running down his cheek. The horse thrashed in the current harness, tangled eyes rolling white. If it went down, the wagon would twist and take the old man with it. Diego was already in the water on horseback, rope in hand, trying to hold the animal's head upstream. "Easy," he called. "Easy, girl." The horse screamed and fought the rope. Men shouted from the bank, "Cut the harness, pull the wagon, get another team." No, the axles caught. Their voices collided uselessly. Tomas stood at the edge and looked, not at the horse first, not at the driver, at the angle of the wheel, the brace, the current, the way the wagon pulled against itself. His mind grew quiet in the way it did only when something broken told him its truth. "You cannot pull it free," he said. No one heard. He stepped down the bank into the water. Maria Elena's breath caught. Tomas. The cold hit him so hard his ribs locked. Water climbed to his waist, then his chest as he moved deeper. The current shoved at him, trying to take his feet. He drove the pry bar into the mud and used it like a third leg. Diego saw him. "The horse will break. The wheel is locked," Tomas called. "Hold her steady. Do not pull until I say." Diego's face tightened, but he nodded. That was to his credit. Tomas pushed under the broken side of the bridge. The iron brace had twisted over the wagon rim like a hooked finger. He wedged the pry bar beneath it and threw his weight down. Nothing moved. The water hammered his body sideways. His gloves were soaked through, useless against the cold metal. He changed the angle and tried again. The horse kicked. Diego's bay sidestepped, nearly losing footing, but Diego held the rope and cursed softly through his teeth. On the bank, Maria Elena had one hand over her mouth. Nico Romero stood beside her, rain running down his face. He had come with the other children and now stared at the trapped horse with a terror that belonged to memory. Tomas felt the pry bar slip. Iron tore through his right glove and opened the palm beneath. Pain flashed bright and clean. He set it aside. That was what a man did with pain when something still needed doing. He braced his shoulder against a broken timber, drove the hook into the gap, and wrapped the chain around the brace. "Diego!" he shouted. "When it lifts, pull left, not back." "Left." Diego heard him. "Ready." Tomas planted both boots against the submerged beam. The water surged at his chest. His wounded hand screamed around the bar. He thought of his father's cough, of Maria Elena's face by the mission wall, of her saying he was making her choice for her, of the old bridge brace under his hand months ago, rust flaking like dried blood while men promised spring. He pushed. The brace groaned. For 1 second, nothing changed. Then the iron lifted. Now. Diego pulled left. Men on the bank hauled the second rope. The wagon wheel jerked, caught again, then broke free with a sucking lurch. The horse lunged toward the bank, nearly falling, then found ground. The men dragged Abel Trujillo from the wagon seat as the broken front end sank deeper into the water. A sound went through the crowd, half cheer, half prayer. Tomas took 1 step toward shore and nearly went down. 2 men reached for him, but he shook them off until his boots found mud. He climbed the bank, slowly soaked through, shaking so hard his teeth struck together. He sat on a flat stone because his legs stopped trusting him. The world came back in pieces. Rain on hats, the horse blowing hard. Diego bent over with one hand on his saddle, breathing like he had ridden 20 miles. Abel Trujillo sobbing into his wife's shoulder. Doña Pilar crossing herself again and again. Tomas looked at his hands. The right glove was torn. Blood and water ran together at his palm. The left was burned raw from where cold iron had chewed through wet leather. He tried to pull the glove free. Maria Elena was there before he could manage it. She knelt in the mud in front of him, heedless of her skirt, her shawl, the watching town. She took his hands as if they were not filthy, not bleeding, not ruined by work. "Do not," he said weakly. "You will dirty your gloves." Her eyes lifted to his. The rain moved over her face like tears, but her voice did not tremble. "You keep saying you have nothing to offer, but every broken thing in this valley knows your hands." The words silenced him more completely than the cold had. Behind her, the town heard enough. Doña Pilar stood very still. Nico stared at Tomas as if the blacksmith had become larger than any rider he had ever seen. Diego looked from Maria Elena's hands around Tomas's wounded ones to her face, and something in his own face changed with a painful, honorable understanding. Tomas wanted to look away. He could not. Maria Elena held his hands more carefully. "You went into freezing water because it needed doing." He swallowed. The wheel was locked. "I know. You could not pull it free." "I know." His voice dropped. It was the actual problem. Her expression softened, but the sorrow in it remained. "That is what I have been trying to tell you." He had no answer for that. The rain began to ease toward a mist. Men worked to pull the broken wagon farther from the water. Diego led the trembling horse up the road with a gentleness that made even Tomas respect him more. Nico moved closer, staring at the blood on Tomas's glove and then at the pry bar lying in the mud. "Señor Cordero," the boy whispered, "you saved her." Tomas looked at the horse. Diego held her steady. Nico considered that, then nodded, but you knew where she was stuck. Maria Elena's fingers tightened once around his. That night, the forge fire burned low. Tomas sat beside it with both hands bandaged, unable to close his right fist. Every tool in the room seemed to wait for him. The unfinished iron horse stood on the bench beneath its cloth, and for once he did not cover it again after looking. He could still feel Maria Elena's hands around his, still hear her words. "Every broken thing in this valley knows your hands." He slept little. At dawn, he was back at the forge because broken things did not observe injury, and Christmas had not stopped coming. He was fitting a temporary brace for the bridge when Diego Montoya appeared in the doorway. For a moment, neither man spoke. Diego's coat was still mud-stained from the day before. His face looked older in the morning light. "You should be resting," Diego said. "So should your horse. She is. Better sense than either of us." Tomas almost smiled, but pain caught it. Diego stepped inside. His eyes moved over the forge, the ordered tools, the low fire, the bandages. Then he looked at the covered shape on the bench, but did not ask. "I was going to ask Maria Elena properly before Christmas," Diego said. Tomas lowered the brace slowly. Diego nodded once as if answering the silence. "I'm not going to. You do not have to say that to me." "Yes," Diego said. "I do." The forge fire cracked softly. "She watched you yesterday," Diego continued. "Not the way people watch a brave fool, the way a person watches the thing she already knows become plain to everybody else." Tomas looked down at his bandaged hands. "I was working the horse," Diego said. "You were working the reason the horse could not get free. You helped. I know. That is why I am not ashamed." Diego's mouth tightened into something almost like a smile. "But I understand the difference." Tomas said nothing. At the door, Diego put his hat back on. "She has waited longer than most women would. Do not make her wait because you are afraid to be happy." Then he stepped out into the cold morning and left Tomas alone with the fire, the tools, the bandages, and the small iron horse waiting to be finished. Christmas Eve came to Arroyo Hondo with a thin white skin of snow over the adobe walls and a silence that made every sound seem chosen. The mission bell rang once in the late afternoon, low and solemn, and its voice moved through the village the way smoke moved from chimney to chimney. Women were already setting bread to cool under cloths. Men carried wood in from sheds. Children ran between houses with red noses and stiff fingers, their pockets full of crumbs, their minds already turned toward morning. The broken bridge north of town had been marked with lanterns and rope, and men spoke of repairing it properly after Christmas, as if saying properly might excuse how long they had ignored it. In the forge, Tomas Cordero let the fire burn lower than he usually allowed. That alone would have told anyone who knew him that something had changed. He stood at the workbench with both hands bandaged, the right palm aching each time his fingers tried to close. The pain had a pulse of its own. It moved from hand to wrist to arm and back again, patient as a creditor. He had worked half the day despite it because wagon braces, stove pins, and gate hooks did not wait for a man's hands to feel ready. But now the tools were still. Before him, wrapped in a scrap of clean cloth, lay the iron horse. He had finished it that morning in small, stubborn increments, holding tools awkwardly, stopping when the pain blurred his sight, beginning again when pride tried to talk him into leaving it unfinished. It was no larger than his hand, one front leg lifted, the neck arched, the tail curved slightly, not fancy, not delicate in the way silver could be delicate, but alive somehow. Iron made into memory. Iron persuaded to move while standing still. Nico had asked whether iron could remember a horse. Tomas had answered with fire pressure and the kind of patience that hurt. Now the horse waited, and so did he. Diego Montoya's words had remained in the forge all day. "Do not make her wait because you are afraid to be happy." Tomas had disliked hearing that from Diego. Then he had disliked it more because it was true. He looked around the forge, the blackened stones, the tools in their places, the coal bin low in the corner, the roof patch near the chimney, the second stool by the workbench. He had spent years believing the room explained everything he lacked. Too much smoke, too much debt, too much labor, too little polish, too little promise. But Maria Elena had stood in this doorway and seen something else. Every broken thing in this valley knows your hands. He flexed his fingers and winced. Then he picked up the iron horse, put on his clean coat, and stepped out into the cold. The village watched without meaning to. That was what villages did. A woman lifting a pot from the outdoor oven saw him pass and paused with the cloth still in her hands. Two boys stopped dragging a sled made from scrapboards. Doña Pilar Ortega looked out from the mercantile window and did not pretend she had been doing anything else. Tomas crossed the plaza slowly, not because he wanted to be seen, but because pain had made haste impossible. Snow crunched under his boots. The mission wall glowed dull gold in the last of the sun. Beyond it, the mountains stood dark and watchful, their peaks buried in cloud. The schoolhouse still had light in the windows. He stopped at the door. For 3 months, Maria Elena had come to him, with a lantern, with hinges, with latches, with questions, with coffee-colored eyes that saw too much and asked too little until the asking became necessary. Now he had come to her. He knocked. Inside, footsteps crossed the floor. The door opened, and Maria Elena stood before him with chalk dust on one sleeve and her hair pinned loosely at the back of her neck. She wore the same green dress from the dance, though covered now by a brown shawl. Her face changed when she saw his bandaged hands, then changed again when she saw his eyes. "Tomas," she said. He had prepared words all afternoon. They scattered at the sound of his name. May I come in? She stepped back. The schoolhouse smelled of chalk, cold ashes, pine kindling, and children recently gone. Slates were stacked on one desk. Copybooks lay in neat piles. A row of paper stars hung crookedly above the chalkboard cut by small hands and corrected by no one. Near the front, the lantern he had repaired burned steady on its hook. He looked at it longer than he meant to. Maria Elena closed the door. "You should not be out in this cold with your hands hurt," she said. "No." A small line appeared between her brows. "No, I should not. But I have been doing many things I should not." She grew still. Tomas stood in the middle of the room, holding his hat and the wrapped horse awkwardly against his chest. He had never felt large in the forge. There, every scar and stain had a purpose. Here, among books and benches and careful handwriting, he felt made of rough material. Still, he did not turn away. "I have been thinking about what I can offer you," he said. "Tomas, let me finish, please." She closed her mouth, but her eyes did not leave his face. He drew in a breath. "I told myself it was honor, telling you to go with Diego, standing aside, calling it decency. I told myself a woman like you deserved better than a forge with a leaking roof and a man whose hands will ache before he is old." His voice roughened, but he kept going. "I thought of my father coughing by the door. I thought of coal bills and smoke in the 2 rooms behind the forge. I thought of how people talk. About me. About you. Especially about you. And I told myself that loving you meant keeping you from a life beside all that." Maria Elena's face softened, but there was pain in it too. "I know," she said. He almost smiled. "You always do." The room was quiet around them. Outside, someone called a child home. The sound faded quickly in the snow. Tomas looked down at his bandaged hands. "But I was choosing for you. I was taking your answer away because I was afraid to hear it and not believe it. I know how to fix a lantern. I know how to lift a wagon wheel from a brace. I know how to make iron bend. But I did not know how to stand still and let someone see me." He lifted his eyes to hers. "I was wrong to call myself nothing when you had been seeing me whole." Maria Elena's breath caught. He saw it. That little break in her strength. It nearly undid him, but not the way fear had undone him before. This time it steadied him. "I cannot promise ease," he said. "I cannot promise a fine ranch house or silver on a saddle. I cannot promise there will be no smoke in your curtains or no ache in my hands. I cannot promise the town will keep its tongue still." A faint, sad smile touched her mouth. The town would not know what to do with a still tongue. "No," he said. "It would likely die of confusion." The smile deepened, and with it came tears she did not let fall. "But I can promise this," he said. "In my house you will not be asked to make yourself smaller, not your body, not your mind, not your heart. I will never treat you as too much, and if I do, may God strike sense into me before the sun sets." A tear slipped then. She did not wipe it away. He took one step closer. "You said people have been looking at you all your life. I cannot undo that. I cannot make them worthy of what they see. But I can be one man who knows better." Maria Elena looked at him for a long time, so long. The fire in the schoolhouse stove settled and clicked. Then she said, "I did not come to Arroyo Hondo looking for a man on horseback. No. I came because I was tired of rooms where every chair seemed to ask whether I deserved to sit in it. I came because I wanted work that would not smile falsely at me. I wanted children to teach, a place to stand, a life that did not require me to apologize before entering it." She came closer now. "I found the schoolhouse first," she said. "Then I found the forge." Her voice lowered. "Then I found you." Tomas did not remember setting down his hat. He only knew that it was no longer in his hand. The wrapped horse rested on a desk, his hands clumsy with bandages lifted carefully toward her, then stopped. "I do not want to hurt you. You already have," she said softly. He closed his eyes. "But not by touching me." When he opened them, she was nearer. He kissed her with all the care he had failed to give his own heart. Then the care broke beneath the truth of her answering him, and he kissed her like a man who had been cold for years and had finally stepped into shelter. Her hands came to his shoulders. His bandaged palms rested lightly at her back, careful but no longer afraid. She was warm, solid, real. not a dream borrowed from a better man's life. When they parted, the schoolhouse seemed changed by the fact of their breathing. Maria Elena glanced toward the desk. "What did you bring?" Tomas unwrapped the cloth. The iron horse caught the lantern light. For a moment she said nothing. Then she touched one finger to the lifted leg. "Nico," she said. "Yes, it is beautiful. It is iron. Do not argue with the schoolteacher about words." He looked down, and this time his smile came fully, though quiet. "I thought I would leave it at his door, without telling him. That was the thought. And now," he looked at the small horse, then at the lantern, then at her. "Now, I think maybe the boy should know," someone answered him. Christmas morning came pale and cold. They walked together along the road toward Nico Romero's house, Maria Elena carrying a basket from the schoolhouse and Tomas carrying the iron horse wrapped in cloth. The village was waking slowly. Bells would ring soon. Smoke rose blue in the clean air. Somewhere a rooster made a complaint against winter. Nico opened the door in a shirt too large for him, hair wild from sleep. His mother stood behind him, surprised and shy. "Merry Christmas," Maria Elena said. Nico looked from her to Tomas. His eyes dropped to the bundle. Tomas crouched, not easily because his hands hurt and his knees were stiff from cold. He unwrapped the cloth. The boy stopped breathing. "Iron remembers," Tomas said, "if patient hands teach it the shape." Nico took the horse with both hands. His fingers moved over the arched neck, the lifted leg, the small, strong back. "You made it?" Tomas felt the old urge to hide rise in him. He let it pass. "Yes." Nico looked up with wonder so plain it had no manners at all. "Then you are the best blacksmith in the territory." Tomas cleared his throat. "Do not tell Santa Fe, they will expect proof." Nico laughed and his mother covered her mouth with one hand. Maria Elena looked at Tomas then, and the look was worth more than any praise the town could have made. By noon, everyone knew. That was Arroyo Hondo's gift and curse. News traveled faster than weather. At the Christmas gathering near the mission, Nico carried the iron horse like a relic. He showed it to the Gutierrez twins first, which was mercy of a kind, and told them that Señor Cordero had made a real horse out of iron because he had asked a real question. The twins did not tease him. Not that day. Diego Montoya came to the gathering in a clean coat, his bay horse walking soundly beside him. He greeted Maria Elena first, then Tomas. There was no bitterness in him, though there was something quieter than before. "Señorita Lucero," he said. "Diego." His eyes moved to Tomas. "Cordero, Montoya." Diego held out his hand. Tomas looked at it, then took it carefully with his bandaged one. Diego did not squeeze. "A good Christmas to you both," Diego said. "And to you," Maria Elena answered. Doña Pilar watched this exchange from beside a table of bread and stew, her face arranged in its usual severe lines. Two women near her whispered not softly enough. A blacksmith, one said, "with her education and her chances," the other murmured. "Perhaps she is wise." Doña Pilar set down the ladle. "A valley where everything breaks sooner or later," she said loudly, "is blessed to have a good blacksmith." The women went quiet. Doña Pilar met Maria Elena's eyes across the plaza. It was not an apology. Doña Pilar did not seem built for apology, but it was something near enough to stand in its place. Winter deepened after Christmas. The bridge was repaired with new braces because no man on the council wished to be reminded twice of his foolishness. Diego helped haul timber. Tomas fitted the iron. Nico came every afternoon he was allowed and watched from a safe distance, the iron horse tucked in his coat pocket like a second heart. By February, the forge had returned to its old rhythm. Before sunrise, the fire woke. After dark, the last tool cooled. Coal dust still settled on Tomas's sleeves. His hands still ached when storms came down from the mountains. The roof still needed patching. The work did not become gentle because love had entered the room, but there were 2 cups of coffee on the bench now. And beside the workbench stood a new stool, wider and sturdier than the old one, its legs braced with clean iron. Maria Elena noticed it the first morning she arrived to find it waiting. She touched the smooth wooden seat. "This is new. The old one was poorly made. It held me. It complained." She looked at him. Tomas kept his eyes on the hinge he was repairing, though the corner of his mouth betrayed him. Maria Elena sat on the stool. It did not creak. It did not shift. It held her as if holding her had been its only purpose from the beginning. Outside, vaqueros rode through Arroyo Hondo with silver catching the morning sun. Boys still watched them. Women still glanced from doorways. Old men still measured the seat of a rider and the quality of a horse. A man on horseback was still a story in that valley. Inside the forge, Tomas Cordero lifted iron from the fire. Maria Elena opened her copybook and dipped her pen. The lantern above the bench burned steady, though daylight had come. Nico's laughter sounded faintly from the road as he made his uneven way toward school. The hammer fell. Iron answered. Maria Elena looked up once and found Tomas watching her, not as if he were surprised she was there and not as if he feared she might vanish. But as a man looks at a truth he has finally learned to trust. She smiled. He went back to the iron. The fire kept burning, and this time neither of them mistook its quiet for loneliness.